The sorcerers of Raya Lucaria each follow their own path, laid out for them by the former leaders of the Academy. Those who reached the highest ranks came to be known as Grand Masters, and each of them founded a conspectus, or an overall view of their particular subject of study. Some of the founders of each conspectus are known, others are still a mystery to us, but each has portraits hanging throughout the Academy. In previous videos we've discussed the Hema Conspectus and the Lazuli Conspectus, but sometimes these fields of study don't have enough lore backing them to make an entire video on one group alone. Today we will be taking a look at the Karolos and the Twinsage, one founded by one of the greatest sorcerers ever to walk the lands between, and the other by twins whose history has been lost to us. Welcome to the Elden Lore series, where we walk you through the stories and backgrounds of the characters, groups, and enemies found within Elden Ring. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with us today. We sincerely appreciate every view. If you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Over the past 2 years, we've built a fantastic community, and it's been amazing discussing the ins and outs of Elden Ring with everyone. We've even started a Discord, so the conversation doesn't have to be confined to just our comments sections. Whether you decide to subscribe or not, thanks again for joining us. We're just happy to have the opportunity to keep making this series, and now you're a part of it. With that said, let's get back to the topic at hand. The Karolos Conspectus may be the most prevalent found throughout the lands between, and it seems to be the natural evolution of the study of glintstone sorcery for those who join the Academy. While the description of the glintstone pebble spell does not specifically call out the Karolos sorcerers, it is known as a universal first step on the journey to true knowledge of sorcery, and the noble sorcerer Ashes tell us. His talents were insufficient to be worthy of donning the stone crown, and he is only capable of using the most rudimentary sorcery. That most rudimentary sorcery happens to be glintstone pebble. From here it seems would-be sorcerers are slowly brought up the ranks with similar spells, such as Swift Glintstone Shard and Great Glintstone Shard, both of which share the same description. One of the glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria. The glintstone serves as a conduit, launching large magical projectiles at foes. This sorcery can be cast repeatedly and while in motion. Those unworthy of the stone crown typically end their brief journey into sorcery here. Presumably, those who are able to master these spells are faced with a choice. What do they study next? It seems for many, the answer is the most powerful versions of the sorceries they've already mastered, those of the Karolos Conspectus. This group of sorcerers is given the Karolos Glintstone Crown upon proving themselves worthy of joining the Conspectus. This crown is described as one of the glintstone crowns bestowed upon Raya Lucaria scholars whose pursuits were deemed worthy. Increases intelligence to the detriment of stamina. The Karolos Conspectus is the oldest of the Academy's lineages of study, begat by the sorcerer Azur. Scholars who follow in his footsteps pursue the mysteries of comets. Azur is a primeval sorcerer and likely a founding member of the Academy itself. His field of study is the oldest form of glintstone sorcery on record. Azur and his story could easily be given its own video, so suffice to say, it's fair to assume even the most rudimentary of glintstone sorceries were discovered in his time, and when looking at the sorceries developed by the Karolos Conspectus, we can see their influence. Glintstone Comet Shard is a sorcery of the Karolos Conspectus that looks very familiar to anyone who has earned their crown, as it is essentially a stronger, more complete form of the Great Glintstone Shard. It marks a sorcerer's step toward achieving greater knowledge, as they're no longer firing magical glintstone shards, but comet shards, showing that they are developing a deeper understanding of comets. From here, there may be some hiccups along the road on their journey to conjuring their own comet, and this would come in the form of the Spiral Shard sorcery. One of the glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria fires twin projectiles that form a spiral as they travel, a sorcery of the Karolos Conspectus, the most venerable of the Academy. This was the product of a failed attempt to create a new comet. This spell shows us how even those who have earned their crowns are capable of making mistakes along their journey for deeper understanding. It just so happens this mistake became a viable sorcery. Finally, we have the peak of what can be achieved as a sorcerer of the Karolos Conspectus. Comet. One of the glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Ray Lucaria fires a great magical comet. The greatest of the Karolos Conspectus sorceries that only very few sorcerers have ever mastered. The ability to cast this sorcery shows a sorcerer's progress from their very first glintstone pebble to this perfected comet, and this would be considered the peak of what the Karolos Conspectus has to offer in their study. That is, of course, until Azure broke the Academy's deepest taboo and found a new comet for himself, deep within the primeval current. But that's a story for another time. On the surface, there isn't much to say about these sorcerers. The Karolos Conspectus is the most basic among the Academy, and seems to have the most members across the lands between. These sorcerers have resigned themselves to perfecting their art of casting glintstone comets, and without their leader, that seems to be all they will ever be capable of. There is an exception to this within the town of Celia, where we can find Night Comet, a sorcery specifically designed by the denizens of this town. One of the night sorceries of Celia, Town of Sorcery, fires a semi-invisible magic comet. The sorcery can be cast repeatedly and while in motion. The Celian sorcerers were assassins, and it is said that they often hunted their fellows. This is the only other form of comet sorcery found in the lands between, and while it does not call out the Karolos Conspectus specifically, we think it's fair to assume that the members of this group found within Celia have unshackled themselves from the Academy and developed this new comet that Azure himself may not even have any knowledge of. Next, we wanted to discuss the Twinsage Conspectus, a mysterious group whose crown dons two faces, those of magical twins who remain unnamed, but were clearly fixtures of the Academy of Ray Lucaria. The Twinsage glintstone crown is hidden well in the Academy, but after finding it, the description tells us it is one of the glintstone crowns bestowed upon Ray Lucaria scholars whose pursuits were deemed worthy. Greatly increases intelligence to the detriment of HP and stamina. Scholars of the Twinsage Conspectus were the elites of the Academy, permitted to study and excel in sorceries of all kinds. The wording here is interesting. It says they were permitted to study essentially any sorceries they wanted, which means that typically, if you chose a conspectus to follow, you were barred from learning magic outside of your field. Those that were talented enough to understand and wield magics across various fields of study were granted this lofty title and this curious crown. The Twinsage sorcerer ashes reinforce these ideas, telling us, those who study the Twinsage Conspectus are the Academy's elite, capable of mastering the glintstone comet shard and crystal burst sorceries. This shows how those of the Twinsage Conspectus were not beholden to one field of study, as they had mastered the Karolos spell glintstone comet shard, and two different sorceries of the crystal cadre, the group of sorcerers who pursued the wisdom of stone, the secrets locked in the faint cognition of the Crystallians. While it seems the Twinsages never developed any sorceries of their own, those that joined their ranks would be capable of anything, and we believe their crown is a visual representation of this idea, which gives us a possible backstory on its originators. Nothing is known about the twin brothers who founded the Twinsage Conspectus. Their image is plastered around Ray Lucaria Academy, and is another instance of twins in the lands between. Twins can be found among both royalty and common folk in the lands between, and they tend to come with some level of tragedy and power. Morgott and Moog, the Omen twins, took on vastly different ideals, with one upholding the Golden Order and the other working to destroy it in service of his own beliefs. Melania and Mikola are a pair of cursed twins, both incredibly powerful, but each limited by the conditions they were born with. D, Hunter of the Dead, and D, Beholder of the Dead, share a single soul, and would consider this a curse as they were cast aside by all they met until finding their way to the Golden Order, which was the only institution not to revile them as accursed beings. Smowtown has a fantastic video analyzing the theme of twins in Elden Ring that we strongly suggest you check out, as it deals heavily with duality and convergence, and we believe these ideas can also apply to the Twinsages. These sorcerers were likely fraternal twins who came to study at the Academy of Raya Lucaria together and pushed each other to become the greatest they could possibly be, eventually reaching the title of Grand Masters. This could be the end of their story. It could be as simple as twins who reached the highest ranks of the Academy together. But it seems odd that they're treated as one person, sharing a portrait and founding a conspectus in both their names. We theorize that the truth of the Twinsages can be seen by looking to the twins, Darian and Devon, as well as the Twinsage crown itself. The Twinsage crown depicts these brothers as one, a face on either side, both wielding their own color of glintstone, green and blue, but their stones seem to flow into each other. It is thought that the glintstone depicted on these crowns is representative of the knowledge gathered by the sorcerer, and we know that those like Azure and Lusat, who gained knowledge beyond all others, eventually had their minds more or less turned to glintstone itself. Perhaps what this depiction of the Twinsage shows is another form of link between these two sorcerers. What if, much like Darian and Devon, these twins were actually one, not in soul like the hunters, but in mind? That would explain why they are only pictured together, why they chose the title of Twinsage for their conspectus, and why the glintstones in their crown commingle between the two minds. The Twinsages were each able to focus on a particular field of study and gain the knowledge of their twin, not through studying together or sharing knowledge, but by sharing one mind. This would be an interesting foil to the twins of the Golden Order who focus on the soul, or the more ethereal aspects of existence, as sorcerers dealt with what could be learned and verified through study and research. What could be understood was more important than what you believed. Of course, the Twinsages are not expounded upon in any way beyond their mastery of various forms of glintstone sorcery, so it's impossible to say if our theory carries weight. But we believe the design of their crown contains more than meets the eye. If nothing else, we know they set the bar so high that only the greatest of sorcerers could join their ranks and study sorceries from across the Academy. Perhaps someday we'll learn the fate of these grand twins and the truth behind their tenure at Raya Lucaria. What did you think of our breakdown of the Karolos and Twinsage conspectuses? Were the Karolos the first to take up the mantle of glintstone sorcery from the astrologers? Were the Twinsages Grand Masters truly of one mind, or simply another example of the power of twins in the lands between? Why is the Karolos glintstone crown covered in deep blue glintstone, when Azure himself is taken over by green? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can stay in the loop about all of our upcoming Elden Ring lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden lore.